Hey, Corey. Hi, everybody. My name is Johnnie Harris. I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here tonight. Glad to be sober. I want to thank Stephen for extending the opportunity and privilege of participating in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It's always been my opinion, and I hope it always remains such, that it's some type of a privilege to be allowed to come and sit in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I hope I don't ever get through my sick head that I have a right to everything that goes on in Alcoholics Anonymous just because I'm lucky enough to get sober and stay that way. And I tell you that because everything in my life that's good and decent is the byproduct of the God I discovered sitting at Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Now, I don't know why I have been afflicted with this illness called alcoholism. I don't have the slightest idea where it comes from and neither does anybody else. I have no idea that maybe only 1 out of 10 people who drink are afflicted with this debilitating illness. And I understand, as far back as I can remember, I knew there was something wrong with me. Now, I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I was bound and determined to find some answer for it. For what I did. So I took off on a journey as a young child looking for an answer for whatever was bothering me. I was afflicted with tremendous guilt about everything, about the way I felt about everything, about the way I felt about my family, the way I felt where I was. I didn't understand anything that was going on, and I didn't look for any way out. So I looked up one day, and I saw my grandmother. Now, my grandmother lived till she was 90 years old. She never took a drink of alcohol or smoked a cigarette in her life. And I don't know what that means, but I guess my grandmother never drank. It could have helped it. But anyhow, I looked up at her and she got up on Sunday morning after my family had tore up the house that she lived in. But they were just a bunch of drunken Irish people. And she got up on Sunday morning, put the best thing on she had, and she took off. She was gone for a couple hours. And when she came back, I could see the change that happened to her. She was a little lighter in her step and a little easier in her being. And she danced around these people and cleaned them up and cooked for them and sang songs to Jesus. Now I took a look at that. And I began on a journey that was going to take me through more disappointments with anticipation until I ever got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I put my hand up my grandmother's hand and wanted to go where she went and do what she did and get whatever she had. The problem with that is my grandmother was an alcoholic. I don't know who in my family was alcoholic. I'm probably the only admitted alcoholic besides my youngest daughter. And so I didn't understand. So I went and sat at my grandmother's church and I was trying to get whatever Granny was getting that thing, and it didn't seem to bother, it didn't do anything for me. It did nothing. I still walked out of there the same way I went in. And I want to let you know right up front that there was nothing wrong with my grandmother's church. Nothing at all. There was something wrong with the jackass sitting in it, me. See, I'm looking for something way out here to make me feel better in here. And I didn't know what happened. What happened to me was, the second beginning of a disappointment is that my grandfather and I were sitting on the back porch of his house, and he was drinking somewhere, and I took a drink of it. That's all I did. That stuff did something for me. I carried with me, even today sometimes, about what that stuff did for me, because it went inside of me and it created some type of an attitude that said, damn you, world, it's okay. I'm not good enough to be around the good people, but I'm too okay right here. But what happened to me after that is I do not understand why. It's limited at maybe only 1 people out of 10 who drink. See, once I put alcohol into my system, I'm powerless not to take the next drink. That first drink, as a child sitting on my couch, took me into the gates of insanity and death and beyond. But see, what I didn't understand was once I take a drink of alcohol, I am powerless not to take the next one. One time I got drunk until the last time was. 3 days later, I was pulled out from underneath a bridge and stood in front of a judge and sentenced to the Hutchinson State Reform School. 20 years later, I was pulled out of a car in Compton, California. And I was stood in front of a judge and to 20 years in the penitentiary. Now that's what happened to me when I drank. I got drunk and went places. I went from reform school to junior penitentiaries, nut houses. Now they call them treatment. Nut house is a little better because it's a little more macho. It's got a little better image to it than treatment center, which is a misnomer for what they do. Anyhow, I didn't understand what went on about this stuff. And my next disappointment in life is my mother come and took me out of that reform school and brought me to California. And on the way to California, she said things like this: we get to California, kids, things are going to be different. And they were. We got to California, they were worse. And I didn't understand it, so I ended up in juvenile hall. And I went from one institution to another, living in the streets, doing what I was supposed to be doing. And while in 1941, while I was in the reform school or in juvenile hall in Los Angeles on my way to reform school, I had put myself in a vulnerable position to join some type of a street gang, and thinking about sometime. And I went through that stuff and I didn't understand what was going on. Didn't understand anything about it. One thing right after another, one thing right after another. Entry for the first time. My mother comes to visit me in the visiting screen, and she screamed at me through the visiting screen that I was a murderer. Just look what you've done now, scum. You've killed our baby. I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew I was supposed to be feeling something, but I didn't know what it was. You see, I didn't have the gift of tears that God gives every creature that's born on the face of the earth, because I didn't think they were necessary. I thought they were weakness. See, I was already in the image that was going to take me deeper into hell than anything that anybody could possibly. I stayed there 4.5, 5 years, and I came out of there sicker than I was when I went in. And I thought, well, I got a chance this time. But I didn't have a chance. My mother comes to visit me, and my mother says, please tell me that you're not going to do this anymore. And I looked my mother in the eye, and I could not say to my mother, okay, Mom, I'm going to give it a whirl when I'm in there, because I knew way down deep inside of me that I could not live in a world that I didn't drink in. I just knew that. I've been sober a period of time, straitjackets, electroshock treatments, all that kind of stuff, and I wasn't even 21 years old. And I didn't understand that. And every time they gave me that, I was physically sober as I am right now. And the psychiatrist would sit me across the desk from them in various stages, probably most of the time locked up in the straitjacket, and they would say things like this: Johnny, if you didn't drink these things and swallow these things and smoke these things and shoot these things, you wouldn't have any problems. See, I knew there that they didn't know what was wrong with me. And what was happening to me, unbeknownst to me, was I was losing all hope of ever finding an answer to this insanity that I was engulfed in. I knew it all along. I knew I didn't know what to do. I came out of that penitentiary and I was out, I don't know, maybe 1.5 years, and they tied me down in a bed in the Los Angeles County Jail. I was 128 pounds. I was a bright yellow. I was a classic example of self-will runs riot with all the money I needed to do it with. And I didn't understand what was going on. The doctor came into my room that morning and looked out at me, and this is what he said to me. I'm 25 years old. Son, you're going to die, and there's nothing we can do for you. That did not sound like bad news to me. 25 years old, I didn't want to go on living. I couldn't maintain that image that I had created in the gang. And I had things that I was doing, and I just couldn't live with the guilt of that. I never wanted to ever look in my mother's eyes again and see that hate that I put in there. I never ever want to be reminded of the memory of my little brother's gravesite while they were burying him handcuffed between two detectives, with all the guilt and shame, and just a few feet away from my mother. I wanted to go over there and put my arms around her, but I couldn't do it because I had handcuffs on. And I wanted to be able to tell her, you know what, Mom, I won't do this anymore. But I knew I couldn't do that either. I knew that I was doomed in some type of a hell that I didn't understand whatsoever. And I laid in that bed that day, and every morning the doctor come back. I looked at the chart, looked at me, and said the same thing. He said, you're going to die. There's not much we can do about it. So I laid in that bed for a period of time, counting the hours, waiting for something to happen. And I'm not sure, I was waiting to stay alive. I was just waiting for the big miracle to happen where I did not have to think about anything anymore or be anything anymore. And one night, because I knew nothing better to do, I screamed out the only prayer which is my life. I said, oh, God, help me. Now, there was no blinding flashes of light. Nobody come running down the hall with a dozen donuts saying, we got an AA meeting. I just went to sleep for a little while. And I got better and better and better. And 2 weeks later, I'm up running around the jail looking for some more of the poison. You put me back on the bed I just gotten off of. And I didn't understand what was going on. I spent the next 2 years of my life in the type of hell I hope nobody ever has to live in. I came to a profound conclusion after a period of time when I was in San Quentin again. I came to that conclusion that I had gone too far. I had taken me way beyond what any human being should ever have to take themselves. And I didn't understand it. No wonder God didn't answer my prayer. No wonder I had to walk in this torture and hell for the next 2 years. And 2 years later, a little before that, in the 4th day of November of 1959, I was sitting on a little knoll in the penitentiary in the upper part of the state. And I looked up and I saw some people walking across the yard. Now, I don't know what got me into it, but I do know what happened to me. I got up and followed these people into an old Quonset hut of a building. And I sit down in the back row, not knowing where I was, saw 2 big A's up on the backboard, and I didn't understand anything about that. Anti-aircraft brigade or something. I'm not sure what it was, I thought. And right away, another disappointment came. It became my first meeting, very nearly became my last meeting. Because these people got up there who'd driven 100 miles up these old back roads. And this is what they said. I used to drink. Now I don't drink anymore. And everything is just wonderful. I'm sitting in that room as physically sober as the guy saying that. And I knew one thing for sure, that I was not alcoholic. See, alcoholics are people who drink, put the plug in the jug, and their life gets wonderful. I don't put the plug in the jug. I have it taken away from me. And I can't live with any type of sanity until I get something on a constant basis. So that's what sobriety was to me. And I didn't understand what we're talking about. But I knew one thing. I knew I was not alcoholic. Alcoholics were people who drink. You quit drinking and their life is wonderful. I quit drinking and I become a raving maniac. And I didn't understand that. But there was something about you that is still very, very attractive to me this day, 61 and a half years later. There's something about you, why you would do what you did. Why you would get in a car on a Sunday morning and leave your family. Why would you drive 100 miles up those old back road with nobody picking up your tab or nothing at your own expense to carry to talk to a room full of people who probably didn't want to listen to them, people like me who made fun of them? That bothered me. I didn't understand that. And then I said to one of them guys one day, because I kept going to see if this group would ever change. And I kept going to this meeting one day, and I said to this guy, what do you get out of coming up here anyhow? Would you like to look at the animals in the cages? What's your deal anyhow? And he gave me one of these AA answers that's almost too simple for most of the people coming to Alcoholics Anonymous today. He said, well, son, when you can answer that question, you won't have to ask it. And that's the most simple solution to all the nonsense that has nothing to do with our book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't understand what that was, but one day I sat in there, and here come a guy walking into this thing, and I knew did 23 frat years in the penitentiary. This man was my baseball coach when I was a star second baseman for the San Quentin Pirates for a couple of years. And he came in there, and I didn't believe it, because I told him if he got ready to walk out of the penitentiary, Les, they won't let you make it out there. We can't make it out there, Les. They won't make us. We're too far gone. And he stood up at a podium, this little bandit, and said something to me all the great learned people never knew and still don't know about our illness called alcoholism. He said this very simple to you who are new in Alcoholics Anonymous. Is my whole message to you. And if you're having trouble, it's the same message. You don't have to live like this no more. You don't have to do it like this no more. Nobody ever told me that. They said to me, don't do this and you'll be okay. And when I didn't do that, I went deep across the desk and strangled the guy that was standing. And so after the meeting, I went up to this little guy. And I said to him, Les, because I knew him, I said, how do you learn how to live? You see, what I wanted, and I wanted to lay down at night and sleep all night long without them terrible nightmares that I was having, the things I had done and the atrocities I had committed without the use of some type of high-powered sedative. And he looked at me and he gave me an answer that's almost lost today in our fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, because all the geniuses who were walking in here. He said, Johnny, there's a book called Alcoholics Anonymous in the library. If you go get that book, I'll go home. And I guess he prayed real hard out there, fellow. That's exactly what I found in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And my idea was not to find anything in there, my book, and tell you that you don't understand. My case is different. To the alcoholic, that's a death statement. You don't understand. My case is different. I read the book, and I was going to come back and tell you that I wasn't an alcoholic. Well, something happened to me. The prayer said in my deathbed at the Los Angeles County Jail was starting to take full effect, and I didn't even understand it. One night I was reading the doctor's opinion. In our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, illness of alcoholism. What causes it? What happens to you? You start to drink, you become restless, irritable, and discontented. You take a drink and you're better all at once. And unless, the doctor wrote, you can experience some type of psychic change, there's very little help for your recovery. And I didn't know what that was, but that night in my cell, I came to the conclusion that I was responsible. Couldn't blame alcohol on my family. I couldn't blame the way I was brought up. I couldn't blame anything that I got. I'm the guy that did it. I'm the guy that drank. I'm the guy that took the drugs. I'm the guy that ran the streets. I'm the guy that hurt people. I'm the guy that stole. I'm the guy that did everything. And I went to the penitentiary all by myself. I didn't take anybody with me when I went. It was nobody else's fault. I made that same vow this morning on my knees by my bed before I got up. I'm responsible for everything I'm going to do today. I hope it isn't something so smart and stupid that I have my grace somehow rather upset today. The next year and a half of my life in that penitentiary, I did something that I never did and a lot of people never do. I incorporated the program of recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous into my life while I'm doing time in the penitentiary all by myself. Just with a book and following the instruction that the book Alcoholics Anonymous has to do, the thing I've ever done in my life. And what happened to me, I told that man that day, things that would have probably kept me in the penitentiary for the rest of my natural life. And the only reason I do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous because our book is full of the cautionaries. The book says I have going to go a new freedom and a new happiness. I will not forget the past by which you shut the door on it. And I have done what I've done. I had to write letters to different law enforcement agencies all over the state of California to make sure nothing was hanging over my head if I ever got out of the penitentiary, because I never thought I ever would get out of there. And on June the 4th, 1961, it's almost 6 years now, I walked out of the penitentiary for the last time, except when I go back in there to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to the convicts. And I was telling my wife the other morning, I said, I remember 60 years ago, clear as it is right now, how nervous I was, how kind of frightened I was, how I really didn't want to leave the penitentiary because I didn't know what was waiting for me out there. See, I had never had a job. I didn't have a Social Security card. I never worked. I never did anything. I stole everything or used something or sold something, everything just to compete with. And I spent so much time being locked up that I didn't have an opportunity to understand anything about the real world. But I was armed with something that a lot of people make a lying judgment about when they go into an institution. I hear this stuff all the time from people when I go in on an institution. I hear people say stupid stuff like this. Now, when you get out, it's too long. If you haven't changed while you're in there, what makes you think you're going to stay out? You see, this program, Alcoholics Anonymous, in my experience, requires change. It's not an effort, it's change. And you have to change from the inside out, not from the outside. You don't have to change much, but inside will dictate to you whatever you're doing. June the 4th, 1961, I walked out of the penitentiary. There was an old man from Alcoholics Anonymous who came near on a panel, who picked me up and took me home to see my mother, who fell off the steps blind drunk. They had to beg my mother to let me come and stay with her. I couldn't get out of the penitentiary. I picked her up and told her, Mom, I'm going to an AA meeting. And she said, fine. I think you should. Now, I had to sit alongside and watch somebody that I loved wanted anything in the world. Watch my mother drink herself to death. Kind of thing that's just a little funny idea that you got, a little light wine at your high school prom. I watched my mother 30 years, took her to drink herself to death, but she made it. And I was there while she hated me for a whole 30 years. And I got out of that thing and I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know whether I was disappointed or not, but I remember at the meeting I went to that night was the old East Bay group in Long Beach. And my sponsor, who became my sponsor, Norm Alpe, was there. Norm's dead now, so I can use his name. And he came up to me because he came up to me at a penitentiary on a panel. Everybody went on panels in those days. There was no safety net anywhere. You couldn't hide out at meetings. You had to go out and carry the message somewhere. He kind of fleshed it out too a little. And he walked up to me and he said, I'm going to be your sponsor, Johnnie. And I said, what's that? Because I didn't know. The book doesn't talk about sponsor. It talks about spiritual advisor, and I didn't know anything about that. But I said, what's that? He said, I'm going to help you get things done that need to be done, Johnnie. I said, okay. What do you want me to do? He said, why do you ask me? I said, you just told me, Norm, that you were going to be my sponsor. He said, Johnnie, let's get one real straight. If I can't run my life, what the hell makes you think I can run yours? Now, I really felt disappointed again. All's lost. Then I said, then what am I supposed to do? He said, why don't you just do what I do and you'll be okay. I have followed the same set of direction and taken those same actions for all the years that I've been out of the penitentiary. So he started to tell me something. When I told him, he said, why don't you just get a job and go to work, Johnnie? And I said, well, hit work? He said, you're a bum. I said, I'm not a bum. He said, what are you? I said, I'm a member of AA. He says, you're an AA bum. Bums don't work. Get off of welfare, he said. I said, I ain't never been on welfare, Norm. If you ever say that again to me, I'm going to smack you. He said, what do you call living in penitentiaries, Johnnie? Self-supporting through your own contributions? I didn't have any argument with anything he said. He wouldn't let me drive a car because I didn't have a driver's license. So I had to hitch rides to meetings. The only way I could ever get a car was I had to go to my parole officer because I had a job that I had to come out on a phone. He told me I had to have a job in 2 weeks. I was going back to the penitentiary. There was no easing back in there. If you ain't got it, you ain't got it. And so I went to him and told him that I can't get to work unless I get a driver's license. And so he got me a temporary driver's license so I could drive to and fro work. And that led into little things like my own car, my own insurance, everything. My wife, the mother of my children, came back to me in the first year that I was out of the penitentiary. And she went somewhere and got our little daughter that was born to me while I was in the penitentiary. And I was given another little child to care for. And my life went along pretty well until about the 6th year of Alcoholics Anonymous, out there doing things, going to meetings, kind of lying, really, if you want to know the truth about it, kind of shading the truth because things were well, because I had to go home that night. And I had to go home and find an empty house. And then I had to search the neighborhood of one of the places and find my 2 little girls and their mother, wherever she was. And I usually found her in a bar or somewhere sitting around with some guy. You know, that went on and on and on. And 6 years into sobriety, my children's mother committed suicide. And I didn't understand a lot of that stuff, but the people of Alcoholics Anonymous embraced me. And during that period, that 6-year period of time, the second giant in my life, the man that molded my life, the first guy that molded my life when I was in the penitentiary was a guy by the name of Bill McElrath, who lived in that little town outside that penitentiary. We came to that penitentiary every Thursday night, regular as clockwork, no matter what the weather was or what the snow was or anything. And he told a little story about the touch of the master's hand. He said things like, life is like a great big department store, Johnnie. You can go anywhere, but when you get to the cashier, you got to pay the tab. And that's really true if you want to live comfortably somewhere along the line. And Bill came there, and the day I got out of the penitentiary, I stopped by uh, to tell him it would be something at all. I don't know what it was going to be. I didn't have the slightest idea. All I knew is that I wanted to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous because I felt safe there. I felt wanted there. I felt needed there. I had all the things that you're supposed to feel in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous from the people who were here when I got here. No big deal. They just wanted to help you get sober and stay that way. And my life went on about the business. First it was Bill McElrath, then it was Norm Alfie. And then the man who basically adopted me, became the only father I've ever known, took me under his wing and taught me the things that a father taught people. What a wonderful old man he was. He lived in Laguna Beach, and he was the only father I've ever known. And when I got married again, he and mom were my parents at the wedding. And my life has turned into a fairy tale, if you want to know the truth. It just, I can't say it's been all smooth raises. And, I go to meetings and I'm happy, joyous, and free. And there's no pucky out there in the streets because I'm still basically a human being. And I can get myself in any type of jackpot because I still got a monumental ego. That's why I have to have a sponsor all the time. I got a lot of trouble with my ego by thinking I was something or somebody. Too much praise was heaped on me by the people in the institutional committees about what a magnificent example they had dug up and taken care of. And came to the point where I had to drop everything from my institutional committees because I hadn't been to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous for over a year almost. Well, I've been to meetings in an institution and I got the proud aha and a pat on the back and all that kind of stuff. But my bread and butter always has been to be able to sit with you and watch the joy and the happiness come into the newcomer's face. It's amazing what is happening just by coming and being around you. And Norm died on my 22nd birthday. And I knew that I needed help because Papa was a good Papa, but he was not very strong as a sponsor. Not for me. And so I went down and asked Clancy one day, told him I needed a sponsor. I had been involved in that I shouldn't have been involved in. It's going on at an AA meeting. I was overlooking something somebody did. And I decided to resign from that committee so I went to talk to him about it. And what he told me to do was I'd already done. And I don't know how you are, but when I think I'm right about something and I'm proved right about somebody, I don't give God or anybody else any credit for, or the people of Alcoholics Anonymous, or what I've been taught here. No, I just take it to blame and get it up in my head that I don't really need any help. I don't really need anybody to answer my questions. And so I turned to go out the door that day. And I remember like it was yesterday, it was a little over 38 years ago. I turned around, I looked at Clancy and I said, Clancy, I need a sponsor. He put his glasses down and I thought he was going to say, what an order. I can't go through with it. You're a big shot, Johnny. You know what I mean? He said, but let's give it a whirl. I said, okay, what do you want me to do? And he said, why don't you come to the Wednesday night meeting and call me every day? I went to the Wednesday night meeting for 38 years and sat alongside of him every Wednesday night and never left that meeting going there on Wednesday making coffee. I called him every day as long as I could. And I got to be with him about 3 days before we went into the hospital. It's just something that God has just given me the opportunity to do here, to be a messenger, carry the message of the alcoholic who still suffers. So I'm not a soul saver. I'm an example, good, bad, or indifferent at the program of Alcoholics Anonymous work. It had been necessary for me to drink anything, swallow anything, smoke anything, or stick anything in my arm for somewhere beyond 61 years that I know of. But my sponsor told me as I walked out of the penitentiary, when he said, how long have you been sober? And I told him all of this time. He said, no, you're sober from the day I come out of the penitentiary, Johnny, because in there ain't out here. Practicing member of Alcoholics Anonymous, when somebody's picking up the tab for you, you're on all this handout stuff, you don't have anything to worry about. He gave me the great privilege of becoming a newcomer with a head full of useless knowledge, but a program of recovery that had changed my life. And the greatest thing in my life are these people who have molded me, maybe not in their images, but in actions. That their actions are the things that I promise. You see, I love Bill McElrath. I love Norm Alpe. And I love Papa Chuck. And I love Clancy Emerson. And will be to try to carry on the legacy that these fine men left me. I don't need to do it. I need to have to do it. Service officers always to do is change the book study. The book Alcoholics Anonymous explains to you how you recover from a seemingly hopeless mind and body. And it hasn't got anything with being politically correct. It has to do with effort that you take to overcome a deadly spiritual malady. If you even manufacture about what's wrong with it, the treatment centers to make money describe this thing as we catch it from somebody. And nobody works. Nobody, I don't have the slightest idea. I'm not that smart. But I do book Alcoholics Anonymous over and over and over and over in Bill's writing in our book. He talks about an illness of a spiritual nature, a malady. At the very last thing that was read here tonight in the 12th step, it said, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to try to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And that's all I do. You know, I don't get anything out of it, except I get to watch people recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body in my home group. I watch them get up on that platform once a month or once a week when I sit there, watch them take birthday cakes and thank Alcoholics Anonymous and God and our sponsor. I walk off. I see God's handiwork, sitting in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, watching alcoholics recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I watch them die because of the misinformation that they're fed from time to time by people who really don't know what's wrong with them or anybody else. But I also watch God's miraculous handiwork as one of you recover from a seemingly hopeless. I watched my baby daughter 26 years ago recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Showed up at my house one night, it was raining. She'd been suspended from Boeing where she worked. The child was taken from her. She had nothing. And she said, can I come and stay, Daddy? And I said, this is a rule. You're going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous and you're going to go get you a sponsor. And you're going to do what that sponsor says or you're going to have to walk right back out there in the rain. She took that and she came in to my house and she'd been, I guess, sober 20 some odd years now, 26, 27 years. She'd done more on her own than I've ever done on my own. You see, it's not easy to watch somebody you love battle this illness. I watched my mother. I cried all the way home. I spent the last year of my Papa Chuck's life watching her die from emphysema. And I went down there every week and sat with him. And I cried all the way home because I knew I was going to lose him. And I didn't want to lose him. I never wanted to lose Norm. He died very suddenly. and never wanted to leave Bill McElrath. I'll tell you a story about Bill McElrath. It's really, really very popular. 1975, I was a closing speaker for the International Convention in New Orleans. Somehow or other, Bill McElrath was living in Texas, and he drove all the way over there to New Orleans to see me. And he came into the hotel suite where I was sitting having a cup of coffee and took me into the bedroom. And I said, "What are you doing here, Bill?" And he said this, he says, "I drove all the way over here to see if all this nonsense has affected you." And I said, "I don't know. I never give it much thought." And Sunday morning, when I got through talking, he was the first guy up on the stage. The greatest compliment I ever had in Alcoholics Anonymous came from that little man. He said, as he got close to me and kissed me on the cheek in my ear, he whispered, "It hasn't laid a glove on you." You see, I'm under the protection of the God of my own son, God of my very own. I'm under protection of the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous, because as long as I consider trying to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, I've been given all the magic things in the world. I'm married to a fantastic woman who's taking care of me through this whole COVID situation when I wouldn't be able to take care of myself. I have these guys that I sponsor come and take care of me, take me places in cars and do all these kind of things. What kind of joy is that? Kind of some guy like me has that kind of joy with these guys. If you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous or you're having trouble with Alcoholics Anonymous, why don't you open up our book? Why don't you find somebody that knows something about the book or knows how to walk in peace and ask them what they do? And try to follow them around and do whatever they do. Because when it breaks down to anything else, it's still a monkey see, monkey do program. You got to be careful because there's more people wearing monkey suits in Alcoholics Anonymous today than ever before who aren't monkeys. They tell you all kinds of strange things like, don't drink no matter what. Blah, 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 blah. Put the pug in the jug. Alcoholics don't drink that way. Alcoholics drink no matter what. But if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's people in this screen, wherever you're at, who appreciate the discipline and the structure that is in this fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a line in our book. And this is it. It says, deep down inside of every man, woman, and child is the basic fundamental idea of God. Way down deep, there's where you find it. There was a guy in the 14th century, a Carmelite priest in Germany, a guy by the name of Master Eichert. And I got this from my papa. He said that nature abhors a vacuum, but God abhors a vacuum even more under heaven and earth. And if you could empty yourself of self, you would be automatically full of God. I watch that every time I sit in my home group on Monday and a Wednesday night. I watch the people recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And I know that God is alive and well. And when I get to see people like you, that some of you I've known for a long, long time, I had an opportunity to share their program with. I know that God will take care of me. An old lady held my hand in the penitentiary when I was still in the penitentiary, when I was being disappointed by being turned down by the parole board. She held my hand. She said, everything is going to be fine, honey. And what I knew that day, I know today, and that's been over 60 years ago. As long as I held on to her hand, I was okay. The minute I let go of her hand, I knew I would be full of self again and be lost in the tragic world of alcoholism. And when I'm with you, I know that no matter what's going on in my life, there's going to be something to take care of it, and I don't have to worry about it. And I get the pleasure, the privilege, and the great honor to be allowed to share my story with you and anybody that wants it. And I thank Stephen for allowing me the privilege of coming and sharing my experience, strength, and hope with you. And I hope and pray to God that if you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's been something said that you will grasp and hang on to like your life depended on it. Because somewhere in this meeting, if you're new, the message has been talking. It may not have been for me. It may be when they read the steps. It may be read traditions. It may be read anything else. You grab that like a lifesaver and you're a drowned man and a bad drowned woman. And I know you'll be well because I do know this. If with the help of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, if I can climb out of that hell that I was in and I buried myself in for all those years, anybody can. And all I want to do is tell you this is a long, long walk from a cell in solitary confinement at a maximum security penitentiary to where I stand right now. But for the grace of God, AA and good people like you, I could have missed it all. Thank you very much for listening. I hope we all have a happy and joyous weekend. Thank you very much.